Yeah. So anxiety is going to tell you everything that could possibly go wrong and everything that you could mess up, but that doesn't mean it's the truth. And it's really a protective mechanism. So the first thing you need to realize is that just because you thought something does not make it fact. And that you can I think like 60,000 thoughts a day or something. So just because you think something doesn't make it true.
Empower You podcast is devoted to bringing real-world wisdom and encouragement to our listeners. We discuss a multitude of life principles and the process from an economic, cultural, and societal perspective. We believe that through tough conversations and shared wisdom, we can pave the path and leave a ladder for the future. Subscribe to our channel and let us empower you.
The University of St. Francis Music Technology Bachelor's and Associate's degree programs allow students to focus on the genre and specific area of the music industry that interests them. With concentrations in audio production, audio for video post-production, live sound, music business, and contemporary artist development, there's something for everyone. Here are just a few examples of students' music. Go to sf.edu to learn more.
Welcome to Empower You podcast. My name is Kidboy Cooper, and I am so glad that you are here. I hope you're having an amazing day, and I'm really excited about this next topic and our guest. So let's just get right into it. So in this episode, we're going to be talking about mobilizing your skill set, and maybe those terms are unfamiliar, but here's the way I think about this. We all have natural abilities, natural ways of being, whether it's your personality, the way that you think, the way that you handle adversity. All of these things are skill sets, right? And you may not think of them this way because maybe you didn't go to school for it or you don't have any special training for it, but it is a part of what you do and what you do super well and how you're able to connect with people and work and all of that stuff, right? And so one of the things that I think is very important, especially for students, for those of us who are in school, for people who graduated from school and looking at getting extended education, is to think about what your natural skill sets are. What are your absolute, normal tendencies that are really strong? And how do we use those in order to capitalize on the life that we want, the career we want? Because you can't really learn everything, unfortunately. You really have to be something. And when you understand your natural skill sets and you get past some of your blockages, you could really become something you never expected just by using what comes natural to you. And so in that vein, we have an incredible guest with us today. I'm really excited. Her name is Megan Devito. She is a certified life and health coach. She's an educator. She also coaches her clients through the struggles, through the occurrences and the limiting factors of anxiety and how that affects your life, your relationships, the way you show up for yourself, and it affects your natural abilities, right? Because if you're super anxious, you can't fully be yourself. And so she's going to be here to talk to us about mobilizing your skill set. I am super, super excited about this because we need more expert advice. We don't need just everybody just talking. We need someone who understands how to overcome some of the fears that we have in order to help us tap into our natural skill sets, our natural abilities. And so I'm so excited to have her, and I'm about to bring her up. All right, y'all ready for this? Megan, how are you?
Hey, I am so good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for being here.
Good.
I know it's like, everybody has stuff to do, and I'm sure you're very, very busy. I love watching your content and all the things that you put
Thank
out.
you.
And I just appreciate you taking some time to share with us.
I am so excited that you asked me. Like, this is really fun for me. I love to do this stuff. So this is great.
Awesome. 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 So before we get super far into our interview, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, the work that you do, and what motivates you?
Yeah. So I have been a teacher for 22 years now, I think. I teach at a small alternative school in Columbia City, mostly at-risk teenagers, middle school and high schoolers, but I'm also a certified life and health coach. So when I'm not teaching, I teach social studies, history, government, things like that, and I absolutely love it. But when I'm not teaching, I am an anxiety coach, primarily women and teenagers, but not specifically. And so my students at school, a lot of them come from some pretty tough family situations, different just adversities in their life. And I grew up with a ton of anxiety. So I've kind of used my experience with anxiety to help my students. And about 3 years ago, I decided I would be a health coach. And somehow being a health coach rolled into being an anxiety coach, because that's just, people were always asking me, well, what did you do to feel better? How did you do this? And it just kind of was a natural progression for me to be able to say, oh, well, these are the things I did. And I realized that I had kind of been coaching people accidentally for a while. Even though I was a teacher, I was actually coaching at the same time. So.
Oh, wow. So
Yeah.
you were a teacher to begin with, right? But then you always had anxiety. Did you have anxiety as a teacher? Were you still struggling with anxiety during that time, or had you worked through a process that helped you already?
Yeah. So my anxiety story is actually kind of long, but I started getting anxious when I was about 8 years old. And I didn't really know what was wrong with me. I would just have a stomach ache and just kind of want to be at home. And I don't know what it was, but turned into anxiety that got really, really intense the older I got. I think I had my first panic attack in like middle school, and it got worse through high school. And then it really was terrible when I was in college. And then when my kids were really little, I have 4 kids. And so I would get postpartum anxiety, but it wasn't just postpartum. It was just drug through all these parts of my life. And I remember when I was in college, it was like back in the 90s, and nobody talked about mental health. And it was just like, oh, well, you're fine. You're okay. But I did go to counseling, and I was like, well, this doesn't really help. And I tried these things that I was like, nothing is helping. And I'm just stuck like this. And then one day it kind of clicked. And honestly, it was probably like 5 or 6 years ago now, maybe, that I just put all of these different pieces together. And I remember I was walking not far from my house. I was out taking a walk and listening to a podcast, or maybe it was an audiobook. And somebody said, anxiety is wishing for what you don't want. And I was like, oh. I was like, yeah, that's kind of a thing. Like, all I do is think about the things I don't want. Like, I'm wishing, like, it's like bringing more onto yourself of what you don't want. And that just like hit me. And it was one of those things where I'm like, dang, there is no truer statement in the whole world. So it just flipped this switch inside of me. And I started learning everything I could from, not only my coaching, I decided I was going to be a coach. Like a week later, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to coach. And I learned these skills that I'm like, whoa, that really works. And then I kind of went back into my past and was like, oh, wait, I learned something similar to that when I went to counseling in college. So I started pulling all of these different areas of knowledge, and somehow I ended up feeling really great. And so that is what I coach on. Yeah, that's really how it happened. It was kind of like a lot of grit work, I guess. Yeah.
That's amazing. I think that's really powerful to be able to use your own experience, your own life in a way that can really empower other people. And the fact that you struggle with anxiety, the fact that you struggled with anxiety and have now come to a place where you are able to live normally and feel healthy and to feel good. Like, that's
Yeah.
powerful. I know so many people, and even myself at times, who struggle getting over that hump, right? Getting
Yeah.
past those initial gut reactions of dwelling on all the things you don't want. You know what I mean? What's been one of your favorite coping mechanisms?
Let's see. I think the one that initially helped me, like I would like to say, oh, this was other than that one quote, I would love to say that the one thing that helped me was just this, but everything kind of coincided with everything else. I really think it could have started with getting up and moving, like taking a walk every single day. But the thing I know that, because I think it's important for people to know that everybody gets anxious. It's not just people with anxiety that are anxious. Like literally everybody gets anxious from time to time. But for people with anxiety, it's like we're really good at it. We're really, really gifted at getting super worked up over things. So one of the things that really helps me is just this breathing technique that when you learn about how your brain functions and like the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic, your sympathetic is fight or flight. And when you're anxious, you're in fight or flight. And but you can actually flip the switch on your nervous system and turn off that sympathetic nervous system and turn on your parasympathetic, which is your rest and relax. And it's really just changing the way you breathe. Super simple. I know it sounds ridiculous. And that's why when people say, hey, just breathe. And I'm like, yeah, I'm already breathing. I'm like alive. I'm breathing. And if you don't do it right, though, it doesn't work. Like if you don't do it right, it can make you feel kind of uncomfortable. But when I learned how to do that, no matter where I was, and I've literally done this, like shopping at Target or driving my car or teaching a class, if I start to feel anxious for no particular reason, you can do this and nobody knows. Like you could do it in a restaurant, nobody would know. So it's just this breathing technique that it's called 5-5-7 breathing. And it's the quickest way I know to shut off that fight or flight response.
Wow. So for anybody who's listening to this, how do they know if they have anxiety issues? So for many people, they don't have any language or any real framework around what it means to be anxious. You know, we see all these dramatic representations and it's like, well, I don't do any of that. But you said most of us suffer from some type of anxiousness. How do we know this? What are some indicators that people may not associate with anxiousness, but that are present?
Yeah. So for some people, anxiety might just be, oh, I was really nervous before I had to give a speech or be on a podcast or something like that. And then it goes away. So if that anxiety goes away when the situation is removed, then you had normal anxiety. It's normal to be anxious before you take a test or go to a job interview or anything like that. That's pretty normal. And most people are like, oh, so glad that's gone. Or even if you're going to do, say, like, you have to go in for a doctor's appointment. Some people get really nervous about that. For people who have an anxiety issue, though, it's really a lot more of that. That anxiety can swirl around in your head for a long time. It's almost like sticky. I would call it like a sticky thought, or it moves from one worry to the next. How like, oh, I was worried about this, but the next thing I was worried, and the next thing and the next thing. And there's a lot of like physical and emotional sensations that you can get. Some people will say like my throat gets tight, or I feel like I can't swallow. Other people will get tingling in their hands and feet. Anger is one where you just are snappy all the time. Being really snappy and angry just out of the blue can be an anxiety response. Sleepiness, just wanting to sleep a lot can be an anxiety response. Gosh, there's so many. Upset stomach is a big one, and like acid reflux, that's a huge one for people. Headaches, like everything you can think of. Like you tell me that, I'll be like, yes, that's anxiety.
Yeah, and you said it's the type that spirals, right? So it's not like just when you're about to do this one thing. It's the feeling of all these things happening, but they just continue to spiral and continue to evolve into bigger and bigger and bigger things.
Right. Or even feeling just like this underlying sense of, I just feel nervous all the time. Like if it's a constant feeling of dread, or like I just don't feel like I'm inside of myself, like that kind of thing, that is anxiety. And not really, it doesn't have to be directed at anything in particular. Some people just have this underlying feeling of something is wrong, but they can't really put their finger on it.
Okay. That's interesting. So I didn't start really understanding what anxiety and all these other things were until I was probably 25, 23, 20, something like that. Between 23 and 25, I would say. And I started to notice somebody I was very close to who exhibited a lot of signs of being bipolar and of anxiety and things like that. And so, and of depression as well. And so I got kind of a masterclass just being in that environment with them, and watching how, it completely ruled their life and the things that they did, the things they wouldn't do, the stuff that they absolutely should have done, but they were just too incredibly anxious to do it, to leave the house, to complete it. It was just a really interesting thing. And so I learned by watching that, okay, maybe there's something to all of this, because, I grew up in an environment where, nobody talks about that kind of stuff, like it's other people's excuses is what sometimes it was regarded as, it's like, oh, well, that's because you don't want to do this, or that's just because yada, yada, yada. And as I got older, I was like, I don't know. People seem to be taking a really hard road, not because they want to, but because they just can't seem to function, And so it's like, okay, maybe there's more to this. And so to hear you take what you were experiencing, which was natural for you, and really dive into an uncomfortable space in order to come out with something helpful to other people, I think is really awesome. And as we're talking about, utilizing the natural things that about, I did an exercise with a group, and I told them to write down their expertise, and I told them to make sure they put their own information in there. Their age, their gender, their race, their how they identify, because they're experts about all of those things. And so as we have these discussions about education and skill sets, I think it's important we understand we're born with a unique set of information and skills that we can capitalize on. And I feel like that's what you've done with all of your anxiety coaching and things like that. Do you think you're a natural teacher in this regard, or was this were you nervous to take this approach to it? Because with health and wellness coaching and life coaching rather, there's a lot of different avenues you could take,
Yeah. I do feel like I'm a natural teacher. I've taught all different grade levels. So that the teaching part came naturally to me. I'm like, oh, I can tell anybody this. The part that was different was I automatically figured, oh, if you can teach, you can coach. But it's like the yin yang thing. Like there's the opposite side of teaching, which has been actually really challenging, but really fun, because I get to learn so much. And so growing up, I really felt like I was the only person in the world that had anxiety. I didn't know anybody. I'm 45 years old. So in the 80s, it was like, suck it up, buttercup, you're going to be fine. I mean, it was like, well, there's nothing wrong with you, so just get over it. It's all in your head. So we just lived with it. And I'm like, well, nobody else feels this way. It's just me. And I still, to this day, I talk with clients and they'll tell me something and I'll be like, no way. Like, I cannot believe that you feel that. And I've talked with so many people and I'm still floored at how similar this is, and how every single person I talk to thinks that, like, I didn't know anybody else had this. It's like the weirdest thing where we think that we're so alone in it, but people will tell me something and is this normal? I'm like, oh yeah, totally normal. Everybody's got that. no way. But I was the only person. And so even though we're talking about this more, I think that it's still, I'm still amazed at how much I'm learning from people. So I get to be the teacher, but I also get to be like the student in this. So when it comes to like, was this natural for me? Yes, but also completely no, because I'm still learning so much about myself and this, and how like, oh, next time I feel anxious, I'm gonna try that. Like I'll be like, well, what did your therapist tell you to do? So I'm like gathering information all the time still, because I'm not a therapist and I don't pretend to be a therapist. I'm very much a coach. So yeah, I feel like it was very natural. I feel like it was very much, I like to think that this is really the reason that I lived the way I did for so long. I get to help my own kids. I get to help my students. I get to help, my friends and anybody else that's really struggling. So for me to be able to talk to people about this and to really let them know that like, hey, you've got everything inside of you that you need right now to not have to do. This is not a life sentence. I mean, at all. You just have some really, you're just really gifted storyteller, and you have some really bad habits that are keeping you right where you are. And so anxiety itself is very natural. It's very much a response mechanism in your brain, but your response to it can quickly become a bad habit. So yeah, that was a lot more than what you asked me. I know. I'm sorry.
No, I think that's really great, because there are, again, a lot of us who we have different skill sets. We have different things that are unique to us, but we don't feel like they're valuable, right? You didn't think your anxiety was valuable until you started to understand yourself and how to use it, or how to defeat it when it was trying to obstruct different things in your life or cause disturbance. And so what I'm thinking, or the way that I think, is that what else are we walking around with that is unique to us that we have not looked at with the proper lens in order to actually use it for good? Because your education doesn't start when you go to a school. It starts when you start to learn about yourself and the world around you. And so I think you're a great example of how you have had all of these challenges and you're still having more challenges. You're the biggest testament of the work that you do because of the life you're able to have in spite of having the same anxiety that would keep other people on the couch. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. Yeah.
So who inspires you? What books do you read? How does one start to become more educated about their anxiety, about the things that may be holding them back? Because for some folks listening to this, they're probably a little shook, because after you described all these different representations of anxiety, they're like, oh my God, is that what my problem is right now?
Oh crap, that's me.
Yeah. And that happens. So what would be the next step for someone like that? So what resources do you use to really educate you on your topic?
So I use a lot of the skills I've learned in coaching, or like going all the way back to when I went to counseling at Purdue. I mean, that was a long time ago, but I did learn some things. I didn't think at that point in my life that they were helping me, but now I realize, I'm like, oh, wait a second. I think I did hear something about that. So one of the books, let's see, I listen to a ton of podcasts, first of all. There's a ton of podcasts I listen to on anxiety and on coaching, because I think it's so interesting as a coach, listening to how other people phrase questions. I think that's really powerful in how I think about myself and the things that I ask myself. And one of the things that has helped me a lot is to really think about what am I saying to myself? So one of the things that it was a coach that I had in the past, and she said, be nice to my friends. I was saying something about, oh my God, I really suck at this. And she's like, hey, be nice to my friend. And I was like, what What are you talking about? And she's like, you stop talking that way to yourself. So if you are feeling incredibly stuck, I would really just challenge people to start paying attention to the stuff you're saying to yourself, because your brain will believe whatever you tell it, which is why it's buying into these anxiety stories anyway. But in terms of resources, there is a book. I started following this one account on Instagram called Untangle Your Anxiety. It's fantastic. It's a really quick read. And it's just, if you want like bullet point, do this techniques to start figuring out your anxiety, that book is fantastic. The book that I read that told me anxiety is wishing for what you don't want is actually You Are a Badass. I love that book. I really love that book. It's what made me a coach. It's what gave me that quote. I swear I did not think that book would change my life, but it very well may have. That was a great one. You Are a Badass. And then there's a You Are a Badass at Making Money. And then You Are a Badass at something else. I don't remember, but it was a good one.
Wow.
Let's see. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, what's, aside from that, the takeaway that anxiety is wishing for things you don't want, what's another great takeaway you had from that book?
It really just opened my mind to different possibilities of what you can actually do. I think that it's really easy to play small. And it's really easy to think, well, this is my space and this is what I'm supposed to do, but I would like to do this other thing outside my space, but gosh, no, I just don't think I can do that.
Yeah.
But the whole idea of really making your thoughts a reality was totally new to me. And that the power of your thoughts and just what you can accomplish when you just lay it out there and turn it over to God and be like, yep, that's what I'm going to do. And that has really changed how I do everything, I think. I don't know whether it was the letting go that was so big for me. Anxiety, a lot of times, is about control. And I think we're all looking to control everything in our lives so much. But I think sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is just let go. And learning in that book that, you know what, say what you want, believe that it's already yours, and let it go. And I'm like, well, people can just do that? Like, you just let go? And that was a really foreign concept to me, because I was hanging on really tight at that point in my life just to like stay alive, you know? So yeah, I think that the idea of it's okay just to like believe that you can have something and actually believe that it's already yours. And so my thought was, so I could just believe that I'm not going to be anxious anymore, and that would happen. And it can happen when you develop the skills that you need and just believe that like, hey, you know what? This can happen for me. And it does. But I know that anxiety cycle can be so like, I'm never getting out. I have no idea how to do this. It's so overwhelming. And it's just like, but that was in that book too. Crazy.
That's amazing. My when you were saying this, it took me back to my mom used to teach Bible classes, and one of the things that she said was that she was using an example of how fear can manipulate your thinking and just terrify you. And she used this example of a lion roaring, right? So I'm not sure if you know this, but the volume, like the decibel level of a lion roaring, is like insane. And so not only does it completely startle you, but it will freeze you too, because it's so loud. And so when you're talking about anxiety, it makes me think about that, you know, that it's just so, and when I think about my own, it feels so loud, you just feel stuck. Like no move is the right move, you know, because you feel completely overwhelmed. So to think that, you know, you don't have to carry that anymore. And I've been doing my own stuff. I write a lot and things like that because I think that has helped me with some anxiety. But for you, what's one of the first stages you go through with a client? Let's say, you know, our listeners are they're walking, they're doing whatever they need to do right now. Maybe they're at work. What's something they can be doing right now to help them start to release some anxiety about their day, some anxiety about starting a new week? Maybe there's a big meeting coming up, or they have a big test or something. What's something they can start doing?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that you can really start doing is, if I go back to that, if you're going into a test and you feel really frozen and shaky and fearful, is shut off that side of your brain, that sympathetic nervous system, so that you can think rationally. The funny thing is that with anxiety, and when that sympathetic nervous system is going, you can't be rational because that part of your brain isn't activated. It's kind of impossible. So when people say, well, now let's think through this, forget it. If you are in anxiety mode, you are fight or flight, don't even try, because your rational brain is not activating. It's just, I like to call it the little caveman that lives inside your head, and he runs the show and he's really loud, and all he is doing is like keeping you alive. He does not know the difference between some crazy story and like a saber-toothed tiger. Like, it's all the same. You're gonna die.
That's huge.
A lot of times with clients, my first question is, have you seen the movie The Croods? And if you've seen the movie The Croods, then you know that anxiety is basically the dad in the movie, and he's like, get back in the cave, get back in the cave. We are not doing anything new, or we will all die. And that's really what it's like. So if you haven't seen the movie The Croods, you should watch it, and that explains anxiety perfectly. So one of the things I like to do first is talk about, well, what do you want? Because we talk so much about what anxiety is and what it, what are you afraid of? What is this fear? What are we talking about? But we don't talk about what we want. That's what you don't want. Anxiety is what you don't want. What do you want? And I find a lot of times it's really difficult for people to get past that, but I'm so afraid. So we start talking about ways that we can calm those physical sensations down and really switch your brain to the other side. And that's done through breathing and through different grounding techniques. I have 10 different grounding techniques. I put on a guide that I think I sent you the link for that. So I have 10 different grounding techniques. And those are just ways really to pull you back to where you are. So some people say, like, stay in your lane, stay out of my business. And I say, stay in your time zone. Because if you are way out front, if you're way up in the future or way in the past, and you are not right here in this very moment, then of course you don't know what's going to happen. How could you?
Yeah.
So stay in your time zone and really pull yourself back into the moment. And that is what makes all the difference.
Thanks for listening to Empower You Podcast. I want to take a second and tell you about a service I've been using that has literally changed my life. Akita Ricks, the founder of SoarYourScore.com, helped me erase negative items on my credit score, provided me a clear path to improving my credit, and raised my score by 100 points in the first 90 days. Like, whoa. The best part about all of this is all I had to do was follow instructions. Now, if you're like me and you need a credit bestie, you need to click the link below and schedule your absolutely free discovery call today. Tell them Kid Boy sent you. That's very, very interesting because, it is a lot of future things that make you anxious. A lot of stuff that you may be looking forward to or not looking forward to that's going to happen.
Right.
Just like, what is going on? That is really great. So for anybody who's listening, go ahead and click the show notes. And the guide link will be in the show notes. So go ahead, click through that, and you'll have access to those incredible techniques to help you with your anxiety. And if you're not sure if you have anxiety, click the link and go through the exercises anyway, because quite likely there may be some areas of your life that, like all of us, we miss, right? And so it's really great to have that resource. So go ahead, click the link while you're there. Go ahead and drop those 5 stars and a comment and say, thank you, Megan. So another thing I wanted to ask you was, what is the one thing that you want people to understand about anxiety, about their natural skill sets, or how anxiety is keeping them from their natural abilities? Yeah,
so anxiety is going to tell you everything that could possibly go wrong. and everything that you could mess up, but that doesn't mean it's the truth. And it's really a protective mechanism. So the first thing you need to realize is that just because you thought something does not make it fact. And that you can think like 60,000 thoughts a day or something. So just because you think something doesn't make it true, and that you get to question your thoughts. And when it comes to anxiety, even though those can feel really big and really overwhelming and really just pick at you and paralyze you, taking one step and just one step into what it is that you're afraid of changes the game. Because a lot of times that apprehension or those thoughts about what could happen kind of dwindle the more we feed the monster, the bigger it's going to get. It's like feeding a gremlin after midnight, right? So like if you feed a gremlin after midnight, and it's going to not be so cute little fuzzy gizmo anymore. So people like to say, what can I do? What can I do? What medication should I take? How can I make this go away fast? And a lot of times it's just you deciding to do the work that it takes to be able to unravel those thoughts and to say, you know what? I'm not looking for fast. I'm looking for forever. Because I can't tell you that I can make your anxiety go away forever. If anybody tells you that, don't believe them, because that's not true. Yeah. But it can tell you that you can do this. And this is anxiety right now in the world that we live in is the most common mental health affliction. It is everywhere. It is from little kids to older folks who are stuck at home. We don't know what's going on. We don't know what's happening. And it is also incredibly treatable. But it's not going to fall in your lap. And unfortunately, you didn't develop anxious habits overnight. And you're not going to get rid of them overnight, but you can get rid of them, and you just swap them out for new habits.
That's amazing. Oof. That's amazing. Wow. You got me thinking through so many things right now. So, I think one of the things you said that is just so true, and that I think sometimes, I believe, more times than not, we do not question our own thoughts. We take what we think as fact, and that's just not true. But it's interesting because, for me at least, I grew up assuming that everything is real, right? That, when you think certain things, because I never had any dialogue around that, right? Especially, you growing up in the church and things like that, you have good and bad, right? But you don't think of things in that area of your body is just telling you something that's not real. And that's because it's never done this before. It's completely lying to you. Like that's a revolutionary idea for me. Now, maybe for you guys who are listening, it is too. But the idea that I get to choose and evaluate even the thoughts that come into my head, I think that's powerful. And it begs the question, like, what are we not doing? Because, like you said, that caveman says that you're going to die if you do anything except stay here. Mm-hmm. What are we not accomplishing? Because we're so afraid that if we make a move in one direction or the other, it's going to be catastrophic, right? Yeah. That's very interesting. Yeah. What's been something that you didn't expect you could do that you now all of a sudden have the bandwidth to do now that you have your anxiety under control?
Oh, gosh. We all tell ourselves like this huge ball of garbage over the course of our lives. Like, we tell ourselves so many things. So I struggled to believe I could do a lot of things. Like, I didn't never think that I could make coaching be a business. I just thought that you just talk to people and help them, and that's what you should do. Or, I didn't think I would ever be able to not panic. So this idea that you can actually let go of things was huge for me. The idea that anybody else felt the way it was to me, but was new to me. But I let all of these thoughts fuel every move in my life forever. And the idea that I didn't ever believe that I could choose my thoughts because I thought they were so big and so overwhelming, even though I knew a lot of them were lies. They were just so big that I didn't know that you could just like not think them. And I was like, that's impossible. Like I think them and I didn't want to, but you really can choose what you entertain. And that doesn't mean that won't float through, but the idea that you can just be like, oh, yeah, I don't really like that one, and just let it go was big for me. And so I didn't believe that. If somebody would have told me that in the past, I would have been like, no, you are wrong. You can't. And it's hard. I won't tell you it's an easy thing. I mean, I've got some clients right now that are like, this is impossible. And I'm like, I know it feels that way, but I swear it's not. And we get through it, but you definitely have to learn how to do it. And so for me, I think that was a really big one, that I get to choose my thoughts and I get to choose what I think about myself and what I'm capable of. And I don't have to constantly entertain worst case scenarios and buy into my own stories. I had a lot of stories about myself. I still have a lot of stories about myself, but I'm working through them slowly but surely. I'm working through them. Yeah.
Wow. You said I had a lot of stories about myself. That's so powerful. That's so powerful. This is the reason I'm enjoying this topic especially, is because before we look to other people to do for us what we want done, we have to look within ourselves to see what we possess that will actually get it done. And sometimes we don't have the tools, but you can't rely on everybody else's systems to do the work for you. You have to control your own thoughts. You have to question the stories that are happening in your head. Maybe the stories that you got from your parents or from your environment or from your church or wherever it is that you're from. You got programming. You received programming from that, and it may not be true at all for you. And that's a wild thing to think. It's like, okay, so I grew up my entire life, and the things that I've learned are not necessarily true for me.
Yeah.
Like, what do you do with that except get anxious and worried?
Right. And it wasn't, and I think I probably might catch flack for this, but I think we put a lot of emphasis on trauma right now. And not to say that people don't have trauma, because certainly they do. But I think that is one of those things where we think that, or maybe this is just me, we think that if something happens to us that impacted the way that we think, it was instantly trauma. And maybe that's the case. I'm not a therapist, right? But I think that, I've spent a lot of time in the last several months thinking, okay, what happened to me to lead me to this place where I had such bad anxiety? And I have zero trauma. Like none. I cannot be less traumatized in my entire life. The only thing that traumatized me was my anxiety. So I think that a lot of times, without going too deep, without digging too deep, I've always been one that said, people say, oh, but my trigger. And I'm like, what, are you just going to like hop around triggers for the rest of your life? Like, you're just going to like not do, well, there might be a trigger there. Like, I'm just not big on the whole trigger idea, because I'm like, well, all right, but then what? Like, isn't that what we're moving past? Isn't that what we're trying to move through? Like, if you want to spend your life, like if doing this is a trigger for you, I get it. That can definitely set you off. But wouldn't you rather learn how to navigate those feelings and those thoughts and to say, you know what? That was a trigger. I mean, honestly, I couldn't watch any show that talked about any kind of disease for years because it would trigger me. And now I'm like, bring it on. Wow. Let's do this. Yeah. Like, I just couldn't do it. I had health anxiety, and I still have health anxiety. But to say, oh no, I can't go there, that's a trigger. I want to go, oh, like we can't, if the more we hopscotch around these triggers and the more we try to avoid these triggers, the more those triggers control your life and the more anxious you're going to become. And I think that that's really important, is to be able to say, okay, so what about your triggers? And this is probably, and I'm not saying trauma is not a big deal, because it certainly is. Some people have some really heavy baggage for sure. I mean, my students, it just breaks my heart. And those are things that you need to work through with a therapist. But going forward, you've got trauma. What can we do to heal that? And what do you want to do instead? Like, what could we do instead that would make your life what you want it to be?
Right. And the tools that come along with that, right? So you're not just responding now you have actual tools and things like that you can use, that when you feel some kind of way, when something is triggered, when you are having an anxious, traumatic response, you still have breathing techniques now. You still have all these other techniques that you can use so that you can live a normal life and continue to utilize the gifts that you have. Because what I know is that the farther that you do, the farther into doing what you feel like your purpose is, the more you confront about yourself, right? And I'm sure you see this with coaching. You know, the more you help your clients and the more you go through, the more you can sometimes be like, man, like, how am I going to overcome this? I need to do this. It sends you into a self-work spiral, right? Which is okay, I think, in a certain aspect. I think we have to be the best example of what our methods or strategies are teaching, right? We should be the first ones to read the book, to figure it out, to go through it. But even in going through all of that, you have to confront the things that trigger you, the things that give you anxiety, whether it's public speaking or whether it is showing up online and creating content, whether it's making calls, whether it's going to interviews, whatever it is that you need to be doing in order to allow you to get past your old self. Especially if you're about to go to school, you're about to leave home, you're about to leave a job, you're about to get another job. Everything past your comfort zone is going to give you anxiety. It's going to try to limit your ability to show up fully as yourself,
Yeah. It's the only way out.
That's the only way out. That's so great. Oh my goodness. All right. So we have to do a thought exercise. We have to do a thought exercise. I could talk to you about this for a really long time, but I don't want to keep you too long. Before, we wrap up, I would love to hear something that you do, something that we can start doing right away. Aside from downloading the guide, what can we do right now to help us be less anxious, so that we can do the things that we're meant to be doing? And a lot of us are caged, right? We're trapped because we're just scared, which is normal, right?
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, let's do this breathing thing, because I can teach this to you in no time flat. And I really think that it is something that, you can do this while you drive or like walk down the street or whatever. You don't have to, nobody's going to know. That's what I keep saying. No one is going to know you're doing this. All right. So this is a grounding technique, and this is going to shut off your fight or flight. I totally recommend with all of my clients that we practice this when we feel good. It's kind of like counting sheep when you're awake, and you can use this to fall asleep too. So instead of counting sheep, you're going to count breaths, or your breath, I guess. So if I wake up in the night and I need to go back to sleep, I go to this. If I feel anxious when I'm somewhere, I go to this. But really learning to recognize where anxiety shows up in your body first. So for me, mine always shows up in like my forearms and my hands. They get really tingly, and then I feel like I can't swallow. That's how I know it's coming. It's not necessarily a thought. It's not a panic. It doesn't start with a panic attack. It starts before that. So as you become more familiar with how your body reacts, you'll know how soon to start this. But in the meantime, you can practice it. You can do this if you get angry, and it's just going to calm you down. So if you put one hand on your chest and one hand on your stomach, most people with anxiety are chest breathers, and that means the air only goes down about this far. And it's kind of like if you're running, you're breathing really quickly and very shallowly. You're not breathing all the way down into your belly. So if you can breathe, when I first learned this, I couldn't get the air down far enough. But if you can breathe all the way down to your belly, it took me like 3 weeks. I'm like, this is a failure. Like, I can't even breathe right. Like, it took forever. ever. But if you breathe all the way down, like into like your belly, and you notice that you can make that bottom hand rise and fall, what you're going to do is you're going to breathe in for 5 seconds, all the way down to your belly. Hold your breath for 5 seconds, and then you exhale for 7 seconds, and then pause. And you can just so we can practice this. So we breathe in, hold, exhale, breathe in, hold, exhale, breathe in, hold, exhale, breathe in, hold, exhale, it's only about 4 or 5 pounds, but I always feel it right away in my shoulders and my back where I'm like, yeah, I could take a nap. Like, that was good.
That's
so
awesome.
It really, and it, sometimes when you're already anxious, it might take 10 minutes. It might take a little longer because your brain is already worked up. So the sooner you can catch it, the less amount of time you have to do it. But that allows you to shut off the fight or flight so that you can really engage that frontal lobe and start thinking and say, okay, wait a minute. What am I thinking about? What am I worried about? And this keeps you in the moment. It really allows you to turn on your rational thinking so you can question your thoughts. So you can say, well, I mean, really? Do I really think that's going to happen? What's the likelihood that that's going to happen? So what if it does happen? Yeah. So, and sometimes just saying, okay, so what if it does happen? And then you can at least address it, right? You can say, okay, well, if that happens, then I'll do this. And there you go. And we may not always like that answer, but it's an answer. It takes the mystery out of it.
That's amazing. So I hope you all did this exercise. I didn't. I like it. I'm definitely going to keep doing it because, for me, especially as I grow my business and I experience growth in different areas of my life, it's constantly pushing me into uncomfortable positions. And that triggers a lot of anxiety and thoughts that are just not true. Thoughts of fear or doubt or nervousness that are not true. And even though you're doing the thing, more times than not, you have to do it scared. And so when you're doing things scared, practice your breathing.
Yeah. And I will say that if you are living with like a lot of anxiety all the time, you might want to change that to a 3-3-5. I have a consult that you can do, and we can talk about different ways to breathe. That's just one way that I use. There's lots of different breathing methods. And I always, people who have a consultation with me, we always go different breathing methods. Some people will say, oh, I get so, it makes me feel like I'm hyperventilating. Yeah, it might, because you might be so used to breathing just in your chest that that's almost too much oxygen. And it'll be like, whew, little dizzy. That's okay. Nothing is wrong. You just got to shorten your breath cycle. So.
Oh, wow.
Before somebody does that and is like, nah, that was terrible. I think I'm going to pass out. Too much oxygen.
That's hilarious. Yeah, don't pass out, y'all. Especially if you're driving and doing these exercises.
Yeah, please don't.
Yeah. I want to be safe. Thank you so much for coming in and talking to us about this. I think it's so important. My whole goal is to provide everything that I didn't have when I was going through college, when I was coming out of high school, even when I was in high school. I didn't have any framework around how to help myself get better. I didn't have it. The only thing I knew was I had to work really, really hard, which I did. And don't get me wrong, that was great. But if I had more tools, so many more things could have happened. And if it's not even necessarily about that they could have happened for me, my focus is how much more can happen for you who's listening to this podcast if you are able to control your anxiety, if you're able to get past those stories in your head that everything is danger and everything's going to kill you and you shouldn't try any harder and you shouldn't do that one thing you're super good at and you shouldn't, because those are your first tools. You should add all the other education and systems to him to help you get better at doing that thing you're naturally gifted at, because you're going to be best at that and it might scare you. So that's why everything that you said, Megan, is so super helpful. And I hope you are enjoying listening to her. Go click the links. They're all in the show notes. Schedule a consultation and just speak to her yourself and maybe get a better understanding of what's going to work for you and kind of go from there. I didn't have anybody to help me get through any anxiety or anything like that. So that's why I want to bring this to Empower You podcast, so that you have a resource you can reach out to and start to handle some of the anxieties and things like that. So you can really step into your gifts and your calling and the things that you really want to be doing with your life. You need better tools. And so reach out to Megan. I'll have her scheduling link in the show notes, as well as the guide for you guys to download and go to her page. How can they find you, Megan?
I'm all over the internet. I have a website. It's 10,000 swords, like pirateswords.com. I'm on Facebook, Instagram. It's Megan Devito on Facebook, and it's 10,000 swords on Instagram. And I will reply to pretty much anything. So yeah, if you just message me even on there with questions, or like, hey, I want to talk to you, I need to schedule a consult, great. Like, we can talk and, just come up with and a consult is really easy. It's just really about, what do you want that you can't get? Tell me your story. I want to hear what this is like for you, because like I said, I'm still baffled at people's stories. Like, oh my gosh, yeah, me too. Like, I get it. So I'd love to hear your story and just, what do you want to change, and how can we make life better for you so you can do all the things? There's only one you, and this world needs all the awesome people that we can get right now. Like, we need amazing people. So if anxiety is keeping you from being amazing, please find somebody that can help you be able to do those things, because that is so important, not just to you, to me, to Kibwe, to everybody. Like, we need awesome people, like, a lot. So
that's amazing. So y'all need to reach out to her, leave her a comment, go follow her on Instagram and Facebook. Stay connected with her. She posts daily content about how you can help overcome your anxiety, and call and get a custom plan set up. It's worth any amount of investment, anything, and because it will really change the way that you look about your life. And if you can get past some of your anxieties, who knows what you're capable of, right?
For sure.
So definitely go visit 10,000 Swords on IG, Megan Devito on all the other platforms, and download the link, get your consultation. Thank you so much for being here. This was incredible. I'm really glad that we got to do this.
I am thrilled that you have me. Thank you, Kibwe. I loved it. Absolutely.
Any parting words?
No, just thank you. And I am really looking forward to, I love stories. Let me hear them. I think good things are coming. I feel like the world is on we're on forward trajectory right now. We're good.
I think so. I think we got to keep planting seeds, because rain's coming. You're doing it. You are doing it. I appreciate you. So y'all, make sure you go subscribe to the podcast, leave a 5-star review, go visit 10,000 Swords on IG, Megan Devito on all the other platforms. And if you or your business is looking to start a podcast, something that can save you time and create maximum amount of relatable, reusable resources for your ideal client, I want you to send me an email. You can send it to empoweryoupodcast@gmail.com. I'll have that link in the show notes as well. And contact me, and let's go ahead and get your podcast started immediately. The world world is ready, and you need to get ready as well. So if you're a business owner, that's just for you, okay? Thank you all so much for listening to Empower You Podcast. I can't wait to speak to you again in another episode, but for now, peace.
Empower You Podcast is devoted to bringing real-world wisdom and encouragement to our listeners. We discuss a multitude of life principles and the process from an economic, cultural, and societal perspective. We believe that through tough conversations and shared wisdom, we can pave the path and leave a ladder for the future. Subscribe to our channel and let us empower you.